It's about that time of the day we rank the Assassin's Creed games, but this time we'll be doing it a bit differently. I actually did a full ranking of the mainline games almost 2 years ago, but a lot has changed since then. I've replayed most of the series, and honestly, my opinions have shifted a lot. The ranking from that old video looks very different now, and that is no exaggeration. In fact, almost every placement in that video has moved positions, whether that is up or down. And with the release of Assassin's Creed Shadows, I think now is the perfect time to rank the games again. But unlike last time, I'm also going to be throwing in the spin-offs. So Freedom Cry, Liberation, the Chronicles games, Bloodlines and Altair's Chronicles. Now, I don't want this video to be too long because, well, there's a lot to cover. In fact, there's almost 20 entries in this video to rank. And just a heads up, this is all based on my personal opinion, so if your favorite game ends up low on the list, don't get too mad about it. I'm not right or wrong, that's just how opinions work. You can have a friendly conversation regarding them, but you cannot straight up say, yeah, this guy is f***ing wrong. So yeah, with all that out the way, let's get into ranking every Assassin's Creed game from worst to best in 2025. Real quick before we get into it, if you're like me and you hate being told what you cannot watch online, then I've got something cool to tell you about. This video is sponsored by Surfshark, the VPN that's not only all about online security and privacy, but also freedom. You know how Netflix changes depending on where you live? Well, with Surfshark, you can unlock full libraries from around the world. I used it recently to watch Breaking Bad on the US version of Netflix whilst I was in Europe. And yes, I am watching Breaking Bad for like the 5th time, so don't judge me. You can also access region-locked shows on services like Hulu, BBC iPlayer and Hotstar. So if you're into stuff like Doctor Who, Rick and Morty or House of the Dragon, you don't have to wait or miss out. Just change your location with one click. But Surfshark is not just for streaming. It encrypts all of your online activity, protects you on public Wi-Fi, blocks malware and trackers, and lets you use one account on unlimited devices, which is crazy convenient. Plus they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk if you just want to try it out. So yeah, take your privacy seriously and go check it out. Go to surfshark.com/hidden1 or use code hidden1 at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Again, that's surfshark.com/hidden1. Try it out and enjoy a better, safer internet. Okay, and so we begin right at the bottom, and this spot belongs to Assassin's Creed Liberation. So it's not a mainline game or a DLC, but more so a spin-off, and I feel like this position is quite fair, especially given what else is in the video to rank. I mean, where do I start? I can appreciate what Ubisoft was trying to do, especially considering that this was originally made for the PS Vita, but it just feels lacking in everything. It's got a very forgettable story, a pretty bland setting. To me, Aveline isn't that interesting, but the one thing that I will give Assassin's Creed Liberation credit for is the persona system, something that has never been seen before in the franchise since, and it's probably better than 90% of the gameplay mechanics the franchise currently has. I also found that the game didn't do enough with its premise. There's a lot you could do in exploring a female assassin in colonial America, tackling issues like slavery, race and identity, but it all just feels a bit too surface level. It never hits as hard as it could. There are definitely some great moments in it, like the ending with the Templars and the Prophecy Disc, and there are some decent characters like Madeline and Agathe. But when I think of all the Assassin's Creed games, this is the one that I'm least likely to ever replay. So yeah, Liberation lands in last place for me. Decent idea, but it just did not stick the landing. Okay, now next up we have the Assassin's Creed Chronicles trilogy. Now I am ranking all 3 of these games as one entry because there's not much variation between each game, and it is quite all over the place because, you know, take Chronicles China, that's a great 2.5D game, but then you take Chronicles India or Russia and the drop off in quality is quite noticeable. I'll give credit where it's due though. This trilogy tried something different, and I respect that. Taking the series into a 2.5D stealth platformer style was definitely a bold move, and you know, visually each game had its own unique art style that reflects its setting very well. China has this beautiful ink brush aesthetic, India's got those rich vibrant colors, and Russia leans into this cold Soviet era tone, so stylistically they nailed it. But when it comes to actual gameplay, it just doesn't do it for me. That said, as I mentioned earlier, I do think Chronicles China has the strongest showing of the 3. Xiao Jun is a great character, and her connection to Ezio from Assassin's Creed Embers makes that game feel a little more meaningful. But overall, the trilogy feels like side content, like something to play once and never really return to. So yeah, the Chronicles trilogy comes in just above Liberation. I appreciate the artistic ambition, but you know, from a gameplay perspective, it's just not something I see myself revisiting anytime soon. Okay, so the last spin-off that we'll see for a while in this video is a more obscure one, and that is Assassin's Creed Altair's Chronicles. Now this one is kind of a weird one. It was a mobile prequel to the original Assassin's Creed back in 2007, and this one came out in 2008, which already tells you a lot. It's meant to expand on Altair's story before the events of Assassin's Creed 1, which, you know, sounds cool on paper. Altair is a legendary assassin, and any excuse to play more of him should be great, right? Unfortunately, the game just doesn't live up to that potential. First off, let's be completely real. This game was not built for depth. It was made for older mobile devices and the Nintendo DS, so you already know the gameplay is super limited. You're chasing a Templar relic called the Chalice, which is a woman, but the story is pretty forgettable, and all of that science fiction stuff with Desmond and Abstergo is completely absent. On the surface, it looks like Assassin's Creed with Animus-inspired menus, but that's about where the similarities end. Gameplay-wise, it's a linear platformer with fixed levels. Think early Prince of Persia but simplified. There's a mix of climbing, jumping and light combat, along with the touchscreen minigames for pickpocketing and interrogation that are fine, I guess. They're kind of goofy distractions more than anything meaningful. That being said, I do have a little nostalgia for it. It's one of the earliest attempts to expand the Assassin's Creed universe beyond consoles, and for what it was back then, it's fine. But looking at it now in 2025, it's just way too dated and bare bones to rank any higher. So yeah, Altair's Chronicles for me sits low on the list. It's not offensively bad at all, it just doesn't bring much to the table. It's a game I would recommend for die-hard fans only, so if you are somebody that's new to the franchise, I doubt you'd ever like this. We finally move into a mainline game. And next up we have Assassin's Creed Rogue. Now just for comparison, in my old ranking video I placed Assassin's Creed Rogue in second last place. So technically it's gone up, but it's also gone down because this is the first mainline entry in the video. Now that's not because this game sucks, but because other games have gone above it. Assassin's Creed Rogue is a game I find decent, but the problem is that there is not much going for it, as it was released alongside Unity to show the different engine iterations. But when I look at the whole series, Assassin's Creed Rogue ends up feeling like a smaller recycled version of something we'd already seen, Black Flag, just with a Templar twist. And while the idea of playing as a Templar is actually insanely cool, the execution doesn't do enough to make you feel unique or essential. You play as Shay Cormac and the premise is great, an assassin who defects after questioning the Brotherhood's methods. That alone could have made for one of the most interesting stories in the franchise, and while it has its moments, the story ends up feeling a bit rushed. In fact, the whole game does really. It was developed in under 1 year, and you can feel that in the shorter runtime and reused assets. Gameplay wise, it's basically Black Flag 1.5, but almost nothing is improved upon or expanded upon. You're just doing more of the same, in colder waters this time. And while the North Atlantic setting is fine, it lacks the variety and life that made the Caribbean in Black Flag so fun to explore. I do think Rogue adds some great lore, especially connecting Assassin's Creed 3, Black Flag and Unity, but as a full game it feels more like a bonus chapter than a proper entry. I like Shay, I like the twist of seeing things from the Templar side. I just wish it had more time in the oven. So yeah, Rogue lands here for me. Not terrible, not amazing, just kind of stuck in the shadow of better games that came before it. Oh boy, this one will get me in some hot shit. In my old ranking video, I placed Mirage quite high up, to be fair. In fact, I placed Mirage at 8th place out of 13 mainline games at the time, and now it's in second last place in terms of the mainline games. That's not because I replayed it and did not like it, but because it's such a mirage of a game that I feel many like simply because it was marketed as a return to roots. And in a lot of ways, it does deliver on that promise, but in others, it kind of falls short of expectations. Let's start with the good. Baghdad is great. The setting is what I'd expect from classic Assassin's Creed. The world design actually encourages parkour again, which is something I've missed. But the problem is modern Assassin's Creed games since Syndicate have some of the worst parkour I've ever seen. And parkour in this game feels like a slightly faster Evo from Valhalla. The city feels alive and it's great to see the franchise return to tighter, more focused environments instead of these massive open worlds that we've had in the last few entries. Basim is fine. I didn't really love him in Valhalla, and while Mirage gives him more context and backstory, I still did not find him super compelling. He's serviceable, but definitely not a standout protagonist. The story overall is very boring, and yes, it has a few twists like the whole Loki thing, but I was not a fan. Stealth though is probably one of the best stealth systems we've had in a while, but that alone cannot carry a mediocre game with mediocre writing. Mirage is definitely a minor step in the right direction for the franchise, and I'm glad it exists, because it did bring back some fans that left a while ago. But when I compare it to the other entries in the franchise, it ends up feeling like a decent homage to the past rather than a bold new direction. In fact, there's a whole situation where this was apparently a Valhalla DLC initially. Maybe if Ubisoft Bordeaux had more time, I would love this game a lot more, but unfortunately this is not a what if video. So yeah, Mirage for me lands here in the video. Not bad at all, just not the return to form I was hoping for. I enjoyed Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry for what it is, but the problem is that it's a standalone experience, so it doesn't feel right placing it any higher, because you could tell it's not a mainline game. But for a standalone game, it actually manages to pack a pretty powerful punch in a short amount of time. You play as Adewale, Edward Kenway's former quartermaster, now fully committed to the Assassin Brotherhood, and honestly I really like that setup. Adewale is a great character. He's serious, driven, and carries himself with a completely different energy than Edward, which is a nice contrast. The biggest strength of Freedom Cry for me is in its tone. It tackles the brutal reality of slavery in a way that's much more direct than most of the series ever dares to. You're not just freeing slaves as a side activity, it's quite literally the core of the entire story. That gives the missions more emotional weight and makes Adewale's journey feel more meaningful. It's definitely one of the more mature and impactful stories out there, but there is always a but. And as much as I respect this game, I cannot ignore the fact that it's still just a very short expansion. The gameplay is lifted entirely from Black Flag, same ship combat, same structure, just in a smaller, more condensed map. There's not a whole lot of variety, and once you play through the main missions, there's not a ton to keep you around. It's also a bit rough in some spots with some jank here and there. So yeah, Freedom Cry is around here for me. I admire what it was trying to do, and I think Adewale deserves the spotlight. It just does not have enough gameplay evolution to rank any higher. It's still worth playing though, especially for the story, but it's more of a powerful short story than a full novel, if you get what I'm trying to say. This one right here is a redemption arc in a way. If you watch any of my videos, then you'd know how much I shit on Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And yes, I know some of it is unfair, but it's just fun to do. But since my previous ranking video where I placed Valhalla dead last, I have surprisingly come to appreciate the game a little more. Now do note I said a little more, not a lot more. It still has many flaws, but I can appreciate what I was trying to do, especially as a game directed by Darby McDevitt. Let's get the obvious out the way. Yes, it's still way too long. The structure of going region by region, pledging alliances, doing rinse and repeat missions, it just drags. But there is also a lot of good buried underneath all of that bloat. The combat is actually great, some of the most fun in the RPG trilogy. The weapon variety, brutal animations, and sheer freedom in how you approach encounters really holds up. England is still not a favourite setting of mine, but some of the environments do look impressive. I also think Eivor's journey, while it was a bit uneven, isn't as bad as I first thought. It doesn't always hit emotionally, but there are some moments that stand out. I do like what they did with the Asgard arc, and how that side of the game was implemented. When it comes to the modern day stuff with Basim, this is something I took for granted because it adds a really interesting twist to the overall modern day. And since Valhalla, we've had two games, Mirage and Shadows, and the modern day in those two games is complete and utter garbage. So since Desmond died in Assassin's Creed 3, I can appreciate what Valhalla tried to do. But again, my flaws with the game are because of its unnecessarily long story. This game did not need to have a story that would have taken over 60 hours to complete. If it was trimmed down, then maybe this game could have been something special. But yeah, apart from the length of the story, there's the terrible cutscene quality, the very forgettable cast of side characters, and it's more of a Viking simulator if anything. Now, back when Assassin's Creed Syndicate first came out, I really wanted to love it. On paper, it had everything going for it. A Victorian London setting, which is one of the coolest time periods they've ever tackled, as it is closer to the modern day. There was two protagonists with quote-unquote different playstyles, and apparently a more refined version of Unity's parkour. But despite all of that, Syndicate just never really clicked with me the way it should have. Let's start with the good. London is fantastic. It's easily one of the best settings in the series. The boroughs, the atmosphere, the Industrial Revolution vibes, it all feels really alive. But from a gameplay perspective, the streets of Syndicate's London is way too wide. It's one of those settings where parkour is very hard to pull off, simply because the environments are not built for it. One major thing I can appreciate is the historical side of the game. The landmarks and historical figures shown in Syndicate are probably some of the most interesting in the franchise to me. When it comes to the protagonist, I I do think Evie Fry is a solid character. Her stealth-focused approach and calm personality made her stand out. Honestly, the same with Jacob. A lot of people don't really like Jacob because he felt like a goofy comic relief character half the time, but to me it gave the perfect balance between the two, one serious and one comedic. But the big issue with Syndicate is that despite the amazing setting, the game itself feels a bit flat. The combat is very floaty and spongy. In fact, I even ranked Syndicate's combat as the worst in the entire franchise by far. The rope launcher completely kills any need for parkour, and the story is decent, but Crawford Starrick, the villain, was probably one of the most underwhelming villains in the franchise. He's got the look of an evil, menacing villain, but he's not got the balls of one. So yeah, Syndicate is placed here for me. It's not bad per se, but when compared to the other games in the franchise, it just feels like one of those games that should have been great, but it's settled for just being okay. Okay, now next up, let's talk about Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, the forgotten side piece of the franchise that was released on the exact same day as Assassin's Creed 2. The game is set immediately after the events of Assassin's Creed 1, and Bloodlines follows Altair as he heads to Cyprus to chase down the remaining Templars. It's an interesting setup, and surprisingly the story has some solid writing. There are thoughtful moments where Altair reflects on the Apple of Eden, and what it means to carry the knowledge and responsibility of the assassins. It has a bit of philosophical depth, even if the main story is fairly straightforward. But let's be real, the gameplay is a mixed bag. They really tried to replicate the console Assassin's Creed experience on PSP, and while the ambition is admirable, the execution is rough. The parkour is janky, combat is simplified, and the camera controls are clunky thanks to the lack of a second thumbstick. Still, it is all there. You can free run, do ledge assassinations, and even fight bosses with unique patterns, though none of them are particularly hard. That said, I will give it some credit. For a PSP game, the graphics were actually impressive at the time, and it was pretty cool to see Altair again after finishing Assassin's Creed 1. There is a bit of nostalgic value here if you grew up with the game, and I get why some people have a soft spot for it, but if we're being completely honest, Bloodlines just doesn't do enough to stand out. It's more of a side note in the series than a real highlight. Not awful, but definitely near the bottom. Okay, next up in the ranking is Assassin's Creed Unity, and honestly this one was such a tough one to place. There's a lot I like about Unity, and a lot I don't, which is probably why it's sitting here right in the middle of the pack. When this game launched, I'm sure we all knew that this game was kind of a disaster, full of bugs, glitches and questionable design choices. But over time, with patches and updates, the game's real strengths started to shine through. Parkour is something I find super overrated in this game, and I explained why in my ranking the parkour video if you want to hear why I think that, so I'll not get in depth here with it. The parkour animations are smooth, which is cool, and the transitions between climbing up and down buildings feel fluid, and Paris is just a beautifully detailed playground for freerunning. The combat though, it's divisive. I actually kind of like the slower, more deliberate swordplay, but I do get why people find it a bit frustrating. You cannot button mash your way through fights like in the Ezio games. Unity actually forces you to time your blocks and attacks, but it does lack the finesse and satisfaction of later games that the RPG side of the franchise did well in. Now story-wise, Unity is not the strongest. Arno as a character had so much potential, a French assassin dealing with loss, betrayal and revolution, but the writing never quite hits the emotional beats it aims for. His romance with Elise is meant to be a major driving force, but it ends up feeling kind of undercooked, and if anything, it's just constant simping between Arno and Elise. And also, I still don't know how to feel about the pacing of the modern day stuff. It's just barely there. Still, Unity has atmosphere, ambition, and some truly great design moments. It just stumbles in its execution. It's a flawed gem, but a gem nonetheless. This game to me is the prime example of just an okay game. Alright, next up we've got Assassin's Creed 3, and honestly, if you asked me a few years ago, this game would have landed way lower on my ranking. I was somebody that thought this game was just average. I couldn't connect with Connor and the game didn't leave much of an impression on me, but after replaying it recently, I've done a complete 180. Assassin's Creed 3 is one of those games that really benefits from a second look. If you only play the main missions and skip the side content, I totally understand why somebody might find it underwhelming, but once you dive into things like the Homestead missions and the Captain Kidd missions, the game starts to come alive. The Homestead especially is one of my favorite areas in the series. It feels lived in, peaceful, and offers a great way to see Connor open up as a character. There's real heart in those missions. The Captain Kidd missions are another highlight, packed with mystery, adventure, and some of the best set pieces in the game. The frontier setting itself as a refreshing change of pace, and you know, I honestly kind of wish more Assassin's Creed games had something like it. Story wise, I will admit it's not the best, but I've come to appreciate it a lot more. Connor's personal journey is stoic, but but meaningful, and the villains, especially Charles Lee and Hatham, are top tier. And let's not forget the modern day. This is the best modern day in the franchise by far. Parachuting into skyscrapers, sneaking through an MMA fight, saving Desmond's father. It's all peak stuff, but killing Desmond, yeah, that was one huge mistake, and one that still haunts the franchise since then. Assassin's Creed 3 is not perfect. The story does not hit as hard as others, and it can feel clunky in some places, but I've come to really enjoy it. It's not the best, but it's definitely earned its place. Okay, so next up we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey, my ultimate comfort game. Say what you want about it, and trust me, I've heard every take under the sun, but I'll always have a soft spot for this one. Yes, I get it, it's about as far removed from classic Assassin's Creed as you might expect. There's no assassins, no Templars, no hidden blades. It's set far before the actual formation of the Creed, and it leans heavily into the RPG side of things, but honestly, I don't really care, because Odyssey hits the sweet spot for me. It's the game I can just throw on, lose myself in the massive world, and explore ancient Greece for hours without getting bored. I think maybe the reason I find this game so comforting is because it's a refreshing break from what we've been used to for the past almost 2 decades. Cassandra, or Alexios if that's your pick, has grown on me quite a lot. The dialogue, the choices, the mythological insanity. It is not your traditional Assassin's Creed experience, but it's an interesting one for sure, and that's kind of why I like it. Strangely, I liked, sailing around on the Adrestia, even if it took me 10 minutes to get to the next island, or taking down mercenaries, or stumbling into cultist hideouts, and then casually spotting kicking a man off a cliff. And sure, the story drags in places and it's probably one of the weakest stories in the entire franchise. And yes, the actual grind of the game can be a bit much. And yes, the whole ezio sci-fi thing goes off the rails. But even with all of that, the game for me is a vibe. It's comfort food. It might not be peak Assassin's Creed in the traditional sense, but for me this game is like going back to a game that always knows how to chill me out and keep me entertained. Maybe it's because I first played this game at a point in life where I was super happy. Not that I'm not happy now. You know what, never mind. Some negatives though, as I said, were the entire story. The cutscene quality was abysmal, a lot of the side quests were meh, and many cities did feel a bit copy pasted, let's be honest. But again, it's my comfort game, and that is literally why I placed it here in the video. When I made my old ranking video, I believe I placed the first Assassin's Creed like second or third last, which is insane. And I deserve to be crucified for that decision. But thankfully I have grown a brain and realized that that was a stupid thing to do. The first Assassin's Creed game is a gem. Now this game right here is pure nostalgia. Every time I boot it up, I'm hit with that slow ambient menu music, the animus loading in, and Altair standing there looking all mysterious and badass. There's just something special about this game, even if it feels dated by today's standards. Let's be real, gameplay wise it's super repetitive. You do the same few investigation missions in each city. The combat is simple and there's no fast travel unless you're on a horse for half your life. But somehow it still works. There's this raw focused energy to AC1 that's honestly kind of refreshing. No bloated content, no skill trees, just you, your blade and your targets. A time when this franchise was simple. Altair is such an interesting protagonist too. He's cold, arrogant and honestly kind of a dickhead at the start. But that's the point. You get to watch him evolve into somebody worthy of the assassin mantle. And knowing his lore after the game and how tragic his life was is all the more reason I can appreciate the first game. Al-Mualim 2 and the whole Apple of Eden side that was introduced. It was just incredible. The setting is one of the most unique in the series, and it's the literal embodiment of the name Assassin's Creed. It's just full of atmosphere. Damascus, Acre, Jerusalem. Every city has its own unique feel, and it still holds up artistically even now. And of course, this was our introduction to the whole ezio storyline, Desmond Miles and the modern day Assassin Templar conflict. For a first entry, that's huge. It laid the foundation for quite literally everything. It's definitely not the best game as something to play in 2025, and it definitely needs a remake, but what it did for the series and how it feels to play, it still earns it a lot of respect. This is the blueprint, and for that alone, it deserves a spot here in the video. I just realized the last game in this video I talked about was the very first game in the franchise, and the one right after is the latest game in the franchise. That's quite insane because there's an 18-year gap between both games. Anyway, Assassin's Creed Shadows is the game that I've decided to place here in the video. Now, if you watch my older videos, you'll know that I haven't been exactly a fan of the more recent AC games like Valhalla and Mirage. So, going into Assassin's Creed Shadows, I had pretty low expectations. I was expecting more of the same bloated, checklist heavy design we've been seeing. But after playing over 100 hours of Assassin's Creed Shadows, I was surprised. I actually enjoyed this game way more than I thought I would. The story for one is good. A lot of people don't like it, but for the most part I did. Well, except the ending. ending. I do think the ending of Assassin's Creed Shadows is probably the worst we've ever had in the franchise by far. But, as for the overall story, it's not quite Origins tier. I don't really think any of the RPG stories can beat Bayek's story. I especially liked how much attention Yasuke got. I expected Naue to be the clear focus, but Yasuke's story ended up being way more impactful than I anticipated. In fact, I'd even say that Yasuke was written a lot better than Naue in this game. Both protagonists have solid personal quests, and when you do them, the story hits harder. The world is simply gorgeous. It's easily the most visually stunning Assassin's Creed game to date, from the way seasons dynamically change the environment to handcrafted castles and fortresses filled with meaningful rewards. The open world here does not feel like busy work. Exploration feels natural instead of forced. Side targets are a standout in my opinion, and I do like how it was done. Now this game is far from perfect. The removal of memory corridor confession scenes is a big missed opportunity, the parkour is too automated, the Shimbakufu are not that interesting until the Templars arrive, the ending of the story is terrible, and the facial animations feel like Ubisoft are 10 years behind in that department, which is a bit strange. But despite that, the game does manage to do a lot of things right. It's far from the best in the series, but it's far from the worst in the series. It's an entry that has definitely earned its spot here in my ranking. We're now moving into the top 5, and I've gone with Assassin's Creed Brotherhood at 5th spot. Now in my ranking, I believe I placed Brotherhood at 3rd best, which I don't stand by anymore. I do think this game has dropped a few spots. When this game dropped just 1 year after Assassin's Creed 2, I remember thinking, there's no way that this game could match up to what we just got with Ezio in the first game. But, in a way it did more than just match, it delivered. Picking up immediately after the events of Assassin's Creed 2, the game follows Ezio's continuing journey in Rome, and it somehow manages to feel both like a natural extension and its own complete story. The conflict with the Borgia family is a highlight, and Cesare Borgia in particular might be the best villain in the entire franchise. He's manipulative and absolutely unforgettable. I mentioned in my old ranking that I thought Rome was incredible, but I take that back. I've just now realized that the design of Rome is flawed. Compared to cities like Venice or Florence, Rome just feels a bit dull. The color palette is washed out, and it lacks the architectural charm and distinctiveness that made the other cities feel alive. The layout can also be a bit frustrating, congested streets, cluttered rooftops, and not the most satisfying parkour flow. I know Rome has its many fans, but for me it's one of the least visually appealing cities in the Ezio trilogy. Most of it is just also empty, and you just travel on horse from mission to mission. But to be fair, there were quite a lot of things to do in the game, and speaking of things to do, the side content is top tier. The Leonardo war machines are genuinely fun, whether I was launching cannonballs from a boat or tearing it up in one of those early tank prototypes. I was always entertained. And then there's the Brotherhood system, which is recruiting assassins, training them and calling them mid-fight. This was such a cool addition, and it felt incredibly empowering. Now I'll be honest, the ending of the story does feel a bit rushed. There's a big time skip that kind of comes out of nowhere, and the final battle with Cesare Borgia feels slightly underwhelming considering the build-up. But it's a minor flaw in an otherwise excellent game. Also, we have to give a shout out to the modern day segments, some of the best in the franchise. The Lucy twist is still a shock to this day, and it still hits, even if the behind the scenes drama influenced it. So yeah, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood remains one of those games that I can return to anytime. It's polished, quite memorable, and is quite literally prime Ezio. Assassin's Creed Revelation takes the 4th spot in my ranking, and to be completely honest, this one gets better with age. It's the final chapter in Ezio's journey, and while it's often overlooked compared to AC2 or Brotherhood, I think Revelations is the most emotionally mature entry in the trilogy. You're not just following Ezio the assassin anymore, you're following Ezio the man, the mentor, the legend, and that character depth is something I really appreciate. Setting the game in Constantinople was a great choice. This city, alongside maybe Unity and Syndicate, is one of those cities that is very distinct with what it's trying to portray, especially with the influence of different factions and tensions bubbling beneath the surface. It's easily a more complex city than Rome, and while it may not have the large scale of the other games, it's dense, and that's what I like about it. It also helps that Revelations to me is the game with the best parkour in the entire franchise. In fact, that's why I ranked it number 1 in my parkour ranking video. The introduction of the hook blade was something I wish I had seen again in the franchise, but then again it really only matched that type of setting. Now, narratively, Revelations is powerful. Ezio is older, more reflective, and trying to find meaning beyond the Brotherhood. His connection with Sophia adds a grounded human side to his story, and some of the characters like Yusuf Tazim, who is a great side character, was somebody that we all loved. It's a bit sad to see how he died though. But how could I talk about this game without mentioning Altair's final memories, and how it ties the entire series together in a really satisfying way. That final scene where Ezio is standing before the apple speaking to Desmond is one of the most iconic moments in the franchise. In fact, in gaming in general. It's poetic, heartfelt, and a perfect send-off. If anything, if the franchise ended right there, it would probably be the best type of ending. But then again, it couldn't really end right there because of the whole 2012 situation that they teased with AC3. Now, gameplay wise, sure, there are some things that didn't hit as hard. The den defense system was there, I guess. I hated it and it was just unnecessary. It's a game that was clearly made as a send-off instead of a full-blown entry. To me, Revelations is a love letter to fans. It's a slower, more thoughtful experience that offers closure to two of the most beloved assassins in the franchise. It's a game purely about legacy, and that is why it's in such a high place in my ranking. Okay, now moving into the top 3, and for my third spot, I've gone with Assassin's Creed Origins. And to be honest, this is the only RPG style AC game that feels like it's truly on par with the older games. I know the franchise has changed directions with Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla, but Origins to me still carries the heart of what makes Assassin's Creed, well, Assassin's Creed. Let's start with Bayek, and man, what a character. Bayek is easily one of the best protagonists in the whole series, and a huge part of that is thanks to Abubakar Salim. The performance he delivered, voice acting, mocap, everything was just on another level. You feel Bayek's pain, his love for Kemu, his internal struggle, and that growing sense of duty that eventually turns into the founding of the Brotherhood. It's powerful stuff. You know, I do wish Ubisoft gave us a Bayek trilogy, or at least a sequel. There was so much more to explore with him, especially after the ending. All we know is that he just disappeared, which is bizarre. And then there's the setting. Ancient Egypt is absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorite worlds in the series, full stop. Ubisoft really nailed the vibe of the world, and I remember being completely, immersed in it. I think that's one thing that Ubisoft always gets right no matter what. It's the visual side of their worlds in their games. The cities in Origins look different from each other. The landmarks were recreated faithfully. The ambience, it's all 10 out of 10. I do want to touch on the mocap for the main story of this game because it was done so well. Every cutscene just felt right. From the facial expressions to the way the characters moved, everything was so believable and grounded. And that's what really makes the story land emotionally. It's kind of sad how we regressed from that level of quality. You look at some of the recent entries and the facial animations or performance just don't hit the same. And that's not a good sign. This game was made 8 years ago. And good luck trying to explain how we regressed in cutscene quality that much. There's something about Origin's story and cutscenes that feels polished and personal in a way that later RPGs did not manage. Origins is just one of those games that got the balance right. It embraced the new formula, but it did not forget what came before. And that's why it's so high on my ranking, and that's why I will always have a soft spot for Bayek's journey. Of course, there are flaws like in every game in the world. I do think Flavius, the main villain, was a massive letdown, but apart from literally that, the game is near perfect to me. At second place, we have the greatest pirate game ever to exist, Skull and Bones. Now, but to be serious, who the at Ubisoft thought it would be smart to call Skull and Bones a quadruple A game? I mean, why are you even smoking? Anyway, Black Flag is the second best Assassin's Creed game to me. I believe I placed this game at 4th best in my old ranking, but yeah, not anymore. It's moving up. There's just so much to love about this game, and no matter how many years go by, it holds up incredibly well. Which, by the way, do we really need a remake for this game? I don't think so. Let's start with the obvious, the pirate fantasy. There is no better pirate game out there, none. Ubisoft took a massive risk by making a game that leans so heavily into the golden age of piracy, and it completely paid off. It's all just so pirate fantasy-like. Even the sea shanties your crew sings, those are so addicting to listen to. I was humming those tunes for weeks after playing. But beyond the pirate vibe, Black Flag is genuinely one of the best Assassin's Creed games in terms of story and character. Edward Kenway is such a great protagonist. He doesn't start as an assassin. He starts off as selfish, lost and driven by greed. But that's what makes his arc so well written. Watching him grow into somebody who actually understands what the Brotherhood stands for is incredibly satisfying, and that's why the ending of the story hits so hard when he finally reunites with his daughter. Now I have to of course talk about the side characters: Blackbeard, Mary Reed, Adewale, Charles Vane, the list quite literally goes on. They are all so good. In fact, I'd say overall Black Flag out of every entry in the franchise has the best supporting cast. They don't feel like generic side characters that are just there. They feel like real people that are well written, and some of their scenes hit hard. If I had to nitpick one thing, I'd say it's the tailing missions. I hated the fact that a lot of the missions involve tailing something. I do hope in the Black Flag remake that they're apparently working on, they at least trim down or change up how tailing missions work. So yeah, overall Black Flag is fun, emotional, adventurous, and easily one of the most iconic entries in the series. In fact, it's not just Assassin's Creed where this game is adored. I believe it's one of the more beginner-friendly games you could play. It's everything you could want in a game, and it's earned its spot right near the top in the video. And so the number one spot, and the game I don't see myself ever changing my mind on, goes to Assassin's Creed 2. I have played every single game in the franchise, and no matter how many times I go back, Assassin's Creed 2 always stands out. Some might say it's just nostalgia, but that is definitely not the case. It's because this game was such a massive leap forward from the first, and so much of what Assassin's Creed becomes stems from Assassin's Creed 2 being the foundation. It's the heart of the franchise, and it will always be for me. This is a game that introduced us to Ezio Auditore da Firenze, and man, what an introduction. You start with him as a reckless, arrogant teen, and over the course of the game, you see him grow into a full-fledged assassin. That journey is so personal, so well placed, and so emotionally grounded that it's hard not to get attached. The revenge arc, the family tragedy, the slow unraveling of the Templar conspiracy, it all just hits. What also makes Assassin's Creed 2 so special is the setting. Renaissance Italy with Florence, Venice, Forli, and Tuscany. It's just great. Those cities have character, culture, and a vibe that still feels alive even today, and the soundtracks in this game are easily the best. Jesper Kid is a living legend. I still get chills when I hear the Ezio's Family track. In fact, there's a reason that the Ezio's Family soundtrack has turned into the main theme for Assassin's Creed. That's just how iconic and beloved it is. And well, also Ubisoft milking it, let's be completely honest. I mean, you will hear it in games like Shadows and Valhalla and so on, but to me I would never feel what I felt when I first heard the original. Gameplay wise, Assassin's Creed 2 was such a massive improvement from Assassin's Creed 1. The parkour felt smoother, combat was more dynamic, and all the little additions like the economy system, the villa upgrades, the ability to buy gear added just the right amount of depth. Plus, Assassin's Creed 2 gave us the glyphs and Subject 16 puzzles, which started to tie the bigger EC-driven lore in a way that was genuinely intriguing. I made a video just explaining how incredible it was if you want to check it out. Even the modern day segments were engaging. Sure, it's not the peak of the modern day that would belong to Assassin's Creed 3, but Desmond's story in Assassin's Creed 2 was getting interesting from what we saw in the first game. The conspiracy was building, and you really felt like both timelines were important, something that nowadays is never the case, as most people just want to play the historical side of the game. If there's ever been a complete package in the Assassin's Creed series, it's this one. Story, characters, setting, gameplay, to me it nails all of it. And there we have it. That wraps up my full ranking of every Assassin's Creed game, from the classics to the spin-offs, the RPGs, and everything in between. Whether you agree with my ranking or not, just remember that this is all based on my personal experience with these games, and each one left some kind of impression, good or bad. Assassin's Creed is a franchise that's evolved in so many different directions. We've seen it go from stealth-focused, narrative-heavy city sandboxes to full-blown RPGs with massive open worlds and deep customization. And while not every entry nailed the formula, I think the variety is part of what makes ranking them so interesting, because depending on who you are and when you jumped into these games, your list might look completely different. But at the end of the day, there's one thing I think we can all agree on. Assassin's Creed has left a massive mark on gaming. In fact, there's a reason I believe it's a top 10 selling franchise of all time. Whether you're here for Ezio's journey, sailing around the Caribbean with Edward Kenway, or the more recent RPG games, there's something for everybody. So yeah, be sure to comment below your own ranking and subscribe if you have not already. And with all that said, I will see you in the next one.